You were born in Gisborne. Whereabouts did your families live in Gisborne? There in Gisborne town or there in WWII?
No, in WWII, Nanny Ma, no, Kuro and Mum, my mother, had a house directly opposite from our house here.
Oh,
They lived there until Kuro went to, and Mum went to Mangakina.
so how long did you stay in Gisborne till? How old were you when you moved to Mangakino?
I was a baby.
You mentioned in our previous chat, that Mangakino, your first years at school, was it predominantly white people there?
Absolutely.
And they were all working on all families who were working on the dam?
Hydro dams, yeah.
How many families was it like an encampment or was it just Mangakino, the township?
It was a township. It was quite a big busy township. The township itself had every shop that you possibly want. Not that what we could have done with a few more, but we had everything there that we needed. They even had a shoe shop where we could buy shoes and get shoes fixed. And we had all the dairies and we even had there was even a drapery shop there that, of course, we never went to because we could never afford. I remember we could never afford the material. Whenever Nanny wanted material, we would go back to Taupo, where Auntie Mairi worked in the material shop. But Nanny didn't do very much sewing. But whatever she did get, she sewed up, and they were pretty good. I don't know why Nanny didn't sew, because she could sew. We had some pretty flash dresses when Nanny sewed. There's only one dress that I remember she couldn't sew because she didn't know how to cut it out. And our next door neighbour cut it out. It was a dress with a full skirt with no gathers. It was cut on the cross. But yeah, I had it. It was nice. It was green and white seersucker dress. I remember it quite well because I loved it. Yeah, our neighbour sewed it up for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Otherwise, Nanny sewed us a couple of dresses, I remember, red and white polka dot. And mine was red and white. Auntie Sherry's was blue and white.
Oh, cute. I wish there were photos.
Yeah, I wish we had photos. I remember the photos are in my head.
Yeah, no use in that head.
Yeah. They can stay there too. To tell you the honest truth, I hated Mangakino because there was really nothing for us to do. There was only the hills that we could slide down on when it was raining, and the lake.
Oh, yeah.
The memories that went with Mangakino, I just practically liberated from my memory. But it wasn't a very happy time because I was bullied at school. She was a tingaio, and she made my life miserable, but I managed.
Did she go to, so she was at school, how many Māori were there at school?
I can remember actually 4, and three of them were in my class, but they left quite early. I think I might have only been 8, and they left because they didn't like the school either. One in particular, one of the girls, she was the one that was supposed to get the strap the same time as me, but she ran out of the classroom and we never saw her again. And the other one was a young boy, he was gay, and I think he got bullied, so he never came back to school either. But otherwise, yeah, just 4 that I remember.
You mentioned too that there was segregation in the schools. How did they separate 4 people from how many others of you that attended the school?
It wasn't so much action, it was done in a way that you didn't recognize it until you left there. And you realized that you never had the same chances as the Pākehā students. Mind you, the Pākehā students all had it all. Their parents, I don't think their parents got up to the same mischief as Mary. Where we lived, there was parties all the time in the weekend. Parties, everywhere you look, there was parties. I think our part of the town was parties. And the other end of the town was where the policeman had his home and the doctors. And that was quite a flash area. And that's where all the Pākehā kids come from. I think they were there because of their father's work. But yeah, it wasn't a very happy part where we were.
So what was your earliest memory of feeling safe or unsafe as a child? When you say
I always felt so safe where my mother was. Wherever my mother was, I can remember coming home from school, and if I couldn't find my mother, I used to go looking for her. Sometimes she was at the neighbour's house. I would go looking for her just to make sure she was there. And 9 times out of 10, she was always home when we arrived back from school, because she knew that the first thing we would ask if she wasn't there. But that's the only time I felt safe was with my mother and with my siblings, of course, because I was the boss. And yeah, so always with my mother.
How do you think that shaped the way you saw the world, or even just life in Mangakino at that time?
I can be totally honest here. I have no good memories of Mangakino. The only good memories I had was when I was in the marching team, because we used to travel a little bit, and I really enjoyed those because I felt safe in the marching team. But the Brownies, I never felt safe there because the head lady used to pick on me. I don't know why, but she always made sure that I would put my pennies in the house. Sometimes we didn't have the pennies to put in the house, and she would stand me up in a corner kind of thing and made me stand in the corner until Brownies was over, so I wasn't able to participate in anything because I didn't have tuppence to put in the house. So I hated that. But yeah, I did enjoy the marching, but that only lasted for a season. But I enjoyed that, and there's really nothing else that I enjoyed in Manukino. I was always around my mother and the babies. So yeah, looking after the babies and playing with them, taking care of them while my mother did other things. And yeah.
Yeah. So that would be this leading into the next one then. The same thing was describing home was probably wherever Nanny was.
Yeah. We were always safe where Nanny was. Even to this day, whenever there's a person that's been drinking or drunk, I just stay away from them because it doesn't matter who it is or what they are. If I know that they've been drinking, I stay right away from them because I just didn't feel safe whenever there was a drunk person around.
Was that only because of koro, or was it other people as well at the time?
Kuro and other people. Yeah. My mother, she was, I guess the only way to describe her would be a person who gave without asking for return. Kuro used to bring people to our home, but Nanny wouldn't let them in the house. But they used to have parties at the house and our house. But there was one person that she accepted into our home, and he was called Alec. That's all I know of him. Alec, he was an old man. And one particular time, and he came inside and he was just talked to Mum. And Mum was grateful for that because whenever Alec came to our home, he used to always bring his washing, and my mother would do this washing for him. He used to always go home with a sack full of clean clothes. For some reason, my mother liked him because I think she enjoyed talking to him. But that was the only person that she would allow in our home if they were drinking anywhere around us. Uncle Dennis's parents were party goers too. And Uncle Dennis was no different to my father. So that was one of the reasons why I couldn't understand why they gave Dennis away, because he was facing the same life as what we were. But I think what helped our parents was the two girls, Annette and Hannah. They were very protective of Dennis, but I still couldn't understand why they gave him to our neighbour, because it's happening.
That was Uncle Dennis was that in Mangakino that they gave Uncle Dennis away?
Yeah, right next door to us.
Were there any moments in your childhood when you felt being the eldest girl and having the duties that you needed, that you had in the family, with helping Nanny and Mangakino not being the best experience as well? Were there any parts in your childhood where you felt seen or heard, and who made that possible for you?
Oh, yeah, a couple of times. I think this is where I was old enough to understand a bit of the gospel, and the times that we used to be able to go when Nanny used to take us. I enjoyed them because I think this was the start of my testimony. Was the branch president at that time was Brother Paki. And he always used to come and say hello to us and talk to us like we were people. And he used to always ask me how I was and how did I enjoy school and what did I want to be. I remember him asking me this question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I told him I'd like to be a nurse. I want to be a nurse. And he said to me, you need to go to school and get an education. That's the best thing you could possibly do. And I think I might have been only about 7. I know it's before I got baptized. There was Brother Paki, and there was a sister called Sister McDonald. She was married to a non-member. She had a daughter who was a bit disabled, and her name was Stuart. It's a funny name, I know. But she used to talk to me like I was her bestest friend. And Sister McDonald would always talk to me too. Like, how are you today, dear? Are you feeling okay? Are you helping mummy? Those sorts of questions. And I felt, and she listened. You could see she was listening. And then she just used to smile at me, and that was it. But I remember being heard by her and Stuart. So yeah, I remember them quite well. And who else? Brother Paki. Oh, and the Tamaris, brother and sister Tamari. Yeah, they had the farm. And she always used to invite me out to the farm, Sister Tamari. But my mother wouldn't let me go. And yeah, so I got to know Irina and I forget the other one's names quite well. Oh, and Rangi. I got to know them quite well because they were always beside me or talking to me. And yeah, they just about it. But they made me feel welcome, that I was there and that I was a person.
So going back to WWII, when Koro returned from the war, how long did it take before Koro and Nanny meeting up when Koro returned from the war? Do you know?
It wasn't long. He used to follow mum around like a bad smell. And as everybody knows, he used to hide in the gardens or wherever it was, and wherever he could hide. And when he had the chance, he would talk to mum and get her someplace and just talk to her.
Nanny was pregnant with Uncle Lee. Was that the same time? When did she find out that the father didn't want anything to do with her?
When Nanny Winnicott called him up and just about blew his brain out with her mouth. But he denied it. He said he wasn't the father. So when Koro came back from the war, he fell in love with my mother, and that was it. He did everything he could to marry her.
I remember hearing, I can't remember who, saying that Nanny was quite the belle of WWII back in those days, which I think sometimes I think it would be hard because Nanny is beautiful, but because she was fair Māori, could speak the language fluently and English. Yeah, do you have any stories, or has anybody ever spoken to you about Nanny back in those days?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I remember quite clearly one time we came back for Christmas, and whenever we came back to WWII, Gisborne, Nanny always used to go and visit all the old people. She used to put her babies in a pram, and I would go with her. And one particular family that lived down Tamateke at that time was the Browns, and I can remember Fuller talking to me, telling me that my mother was beautiful. Your mother was the most beautiful woman in WWII. And there was quite a few people quite a few men that were looking at her too. But they looked at her puku and they wouldn't have anything to do with her. But I knew this is Auntie Fuller. I knew that they would be quite happy to be married to because your mother was so beautiful. Uncle Dawson, every time we went to raid his country, he used to always come out and talk to us. And he used to always say, where's your beautiful mother? Oh, my goodness, your mother was so beautiful. And look at you. He used to always look at the kids, and he used to look at me and he used to say, you look just like your mother, so beautiful. So I used to think my mother was a beautiful person because everybody used to say how beautiful she was.
There wasn't much time when Koro snapped Nanny out. And then they got married in WWII. They moved to Manakino. Okay. You moved to Rotorua when you were 10. Did things get any better in Rotorua?
Yeah, a little bit better because Koro had to I think he had to put his horns in a bit because he had to get up at 6 o'clock every morning to go to work. They used to have parties. I'm not too sure whether that was a Friday night or the Saturday night, but he had to make sure that he was okay for work on the Monday morning. And he always went to work. He was hardly ever home sick. Only when he had his accidents, he was in hospital and then he came home for a while. But other than that, I can remember him going to work every day.
Yeah, and so did Nanny make more friends?
Oh, Rotorua was different. She, Ray Hodge and Fred, what's his name? Fred up the road. I get their name. But Bunty Waimea, they were all her friends. And who else? Oh, Olive.
Oh, yeah.
And Mrs. Tanahu down the corner when she used to live there. Auntie Joy Tanahu. So she had a few friends. Oh, of course, Barbara next door, but Mum wasn't that close with his. Mum used to just look after Dale when Barbara started work. But other than that, it was just, hello, how are you? And that was it.
The rest of school, did you find school a lot better or what?
Oh, it was tragic, actually. I was isolated because I was too flash for them. The way I spoke and the way I presented myself, and yet to me it was a natural thing. So I had one girl that I cottoned on to as my friend, and we used to have a wonderful time just talking and just getting to know each other. And she had a sister who got very jealous and started telling lies about her. But she said, it's best that we don't be friends because my sister's horrible. So we can't be friends because she'll just be horrible to you and to me at home. So I had no friends. One particular girl, another one, Paul Davis, they lived at the back of us on Pulakapa Road.
Oh, yeah.
And I got quite close to her, but the boy she liked started to like me. So she wouldn't talk to me when she found out this boy started liking me. So she went with the wind. But yeah, it was my mum at school. The teachers were really nice. I liked the teacher, except one, Mr. Honui. I don't think he liked me because I didn't like Kapahaka. But when I did the Hinamore and Tutanikai play, I was really surprised that I got picked for that because there were so many other nicer girls, prettier girls. But nobody else would get on that stage. But when I realised why, I thought it didn't bother me one bit because I thought to myself, you picked when the boy who played, there was one part there where I had to hide behind a rock after I swam over to find Tutanikai. I had to hide behind the rock when we woke up the next day kind of thing. And he came looking for me. And instead of putting me up and saying to me in Maori, who are you? Why are you here? He just said to me, hey, are you a virgin? I didn't know what to say. Because I had part this play and I didn't know how to play it and what to say. So yeah, that was my Hinamore and Tutanikai act. But yeah, otherwise I got called on quite often to talk about a book that I might have read or an essay that I've written, those sorts of things, because nobody else would do it because they didn't know how to. They weren't taught how to. If they were taught, they didn't listen. Yeah, now a lot of them failed school, high school. I don't think half of them went to high school. Yeah, there were some nice kids there, but I didn't get too friendly. But then when I started high school, that was worse. I had no friends at high school because your grandfather wouldn't put me into a commercial course and I wanted to go into a general because I knew that if I did general, I'd be able to follow through with nursing. But no, he wouldn't sign me in for a general. He made me go into a commercial. And we had the worst packet teachers, honestly. Yeah, I didn't enjoy that very much either. It didn't last very long. As soon as I was 15, out before I went, and that was it. Getting back to the questions, I had a few thoughts about school. You say if you had anything to, something what was one of your questions to do with what I would say to a young girl now?
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. Hang on, we'll get to that.
Why will the doing and what their communication skills
Yeah.
would be like. I do everything that I could possibly, especially, I'm glad you fellas turned out to be the way you are. Growing up through high school, in Rurukawa school, in Mangino school, I had no communication. She lived in my house. Because at home, the only person I spoke to was Nanny.
Mm.
And of course, my siblings, if we weren't arguing. But I would encourage, if I had any possible way of helping young, especially young women, I would definitely encourage them to educate themselves. Because I know that when I did the nursing course, I was able to communicate better. Even growing up through when I married your father, there was no way of communicating with him because I didn't know how. So a lot of times there's just silence. And the way I learned was through the gospel, through Relief Society, how the old people, the old members, how they used to express themselves about different things. I used to think, oh, yeah, okay. I wasn't taught that. But when I did my nursing course and I realized that I did have a brain in my head, and that sometimes people do listen, I was able to communicate better. And because I was educated a bit more, I was able to speak on things that I knew of, that I could express myself, that I knew what I was talking about, and then I knew that I could do it. Going through the nursing course, I knew if I could get through this, I could do anything. From then on, I took a bit of value in myself, gave myself a bit of value, which was hard because your father didn't like me expressing myself as much as I used to. But because of his patience, he started to encourage me. But as I said, morning and the places that we were at weren't very
Encouraging.
helpful as far as communicating because girls at that time were suppressed quite badly. They were told to be quiet and just listen or do this, do that, and you had to listen. And wanting to express yourself, you didn't have that opportunity because you didn't know how to, because the education that we had didn't teach you that. But I'm so glad you girls are able to do the opposite to what your mother was like. But as I said, when I finished my course, I realized that there was a worth in myself. So I was able to express myself better. I valued myself a bit. But yeah.
Just listening to you talk about that and not being able to express yourself the way that you wanted to because you weren't taught to. It's interesting because of the way that Nanny, going back to Nanny was so shy. You didn't learn how to express yourself because you were taught to be seen and not heard. That's something that I grew up with throughout my life. We didn't know how to express ourselves. The only conversations that I remember were later on in life where Dad had a little bit more time for us to be able to sit down and have those PPIs, those chats. But yet when it got to that time, however old I was, it was, I don't know what you're asking for, what you want me to say here. And being the shy kid as well, because I was the same. I did not enjoy school. I did not enjoy it because I was too shy. The friendships that I did form with, say, Putahi and Jeremy, I wasn't allowed to go outside and play with them because my father was, no, get inside. But there were moments where we could go outside and play. And all the kids were outside playing in those times down on that strip of grass across the road, playing back down or on our bikes or anything. But if anything looked a bit too much, I guess, for Dad, it was like, get inside. There wasn't this, just let it go and play or whatever. And then there wasn't any space or any real talk around or space to be able to talk around. How was your day at school? What did you do at school? What's happening at school or even in church? Because as far as I remember, Dad was never home, or when he was, it was very quiet. There wasn't really a lot of talking.
Yeah. No, your father had the same problem.
That's what I mean. Like, I know it wasn't in his genetics or upbringing to talk either because of his upbringing. So we were up shit creek without a paddle because you didn't know how to communicate. He didn't know how to communicate. And you had kids who needed that outlet to be able to thrive or talk or to share.
And to make matters worse, we had having Nikki too put a lot of burdens on us, and not having the same help that you can get now. We didn't have that, so it was just tic-tac-toe most of the time. You know, so communication is so needed in family, and I believe that's where it comes with education.
I know that the way that I best learn or best work or operate is going out and doing it. Do you know what I mean? Just not the formal sit down and listen to me, because university for me was painful, and it was just because it was literally that. You sit in a room full of people, just listen to these old ass lecturers going through the information and not paying really attention to you unless you booked an appointment and went and saw them for 10 minutes.
All of you fellas were like that. The whole lot of you.
Yeah.
You had your own way of learning.
Yeah.
When you were ready for
Yeah.
it, rather than at the time that you should have been doing.
Yeah.
Not so much should have been, but could have been doing.
I remember in primary school too, the same thing. Oh, we're going to read now. And I'm like, I don't feel like reading. Right. And then get in trouble for doing that because it wasn't what the regimented routine of what everybody was meant to be doing. I remember very clearly being told to do something and sitting there knowing I didn't want to do it, so I wouldn't, but yet getting in trouble. Or I remember on my report saying Tarina gets easily distracted. So learning how to communicate for me in my life came later. Like that was learned through the friendships that I gained later on in life, because in some small way it was learnt in their family or in their worlds. They were able to encourage that from me and the friendship and in the relationships that I had. It wasn't until later, obviously, I think we've spoken about this before, later in my life that I was able to really sit down and talk to Dad about things that were going on, which was not far after he went and died. I know things were implemented earlier in life. There's moments there, like very small moments that ended up being big and meaningful, where he would plant the seeds or try to communicate or have that time, but also being who Dad was, where there was a lot of moments where he would pull away from that, or he'd be so stuck in his own little world that anything outside that he just didn't see or understand or know, which I find interesting, because him going to college, which is where I learned a lot of my skills and things with friendships and communication. I know those moments for him were very precious and he loved his time there. Why he wasn't a bit more open, or a bit more, he didn't put those things into practice or implemented those in married life or when the kids come along, us kids come along.
When we first got married, I had a hard time trying to understand him, lots of time. I used to get really angry with him, but I never expressed my anger because I didn't know how. So there was a lot of silence on my part.
Yeah.
And I cope with until he started to realize that my silence meant something. And he used to, I guess this is where, I don't know, maybe he was put on the mantle of a bishop, because as we got older and we got further into our marriage, we started to become a bit more communicative, which it was a hard thing for him, because as I speak, me too, but I'm as much better than him. He just didn't know how to express what he was feeling.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Nikki, maybe, that he realized that he needed to put a bit more effort into what we were going through, because he knew that I wasn't coping by myself. So when we had Nikki, and then shown straight after, he had the pull finger, otherwise I would have told him to get lost, because I couldn't cope with him the babies and trying to bring you from all that.
Yeah.
And he did the full finger, but a lot was lost. But yeah, it was a journey with your father and I.
Looking back on the marriage, what do you think was needed most at the time that you didn't know how to ask for? Was it the support?
Yeah, when we first got married, there was a few years there where I had no spending money. I couldn't buy a piece of material, or I couldn't buy a underarm deodorant or a talcum powder unless I really needed it. And I knew there was funds there, but he just wouldn't let it go because he was too scared that we might not have enough for food or to pay the bills. He was really, what's the word? He wouldn't spend money unless it was really necessary. So when I started work, different story. It was a big thing between Dad and I, but we kept it to ourselves.
Yeah.
It was a long journey, but he soon learned at the end.
Going back to that's his scarcity around finances, money. And from what I remember, Nanny Naraka was like that as well, wasn't she?
She was the one that taught him.
Given that she was the sole provider of the family, really, after Koro passed away so early.
No, she was always the provider because even when when Koro Pa was alive, she was working 3 jobs to get them a home, to feed them. He used to help sometimes.
Yeah.
Not that much of help at all. He got a few crosses when we used to talk about it. And she used to tell, they're like, no, he used to be useless with his money. He used to drink and used to smoke and all that sort of thing. She said, I was the one that got our home, our cars, and our food. So, yeah, that's where he learned it on.
Yeah, okay. What were some of the unspoken rules that you guys carried into your marriage about love and loyalty or survival?
The unspoken one.
Rules.
He hated giving things away. Honestly, he did. Because he never had much. Auntie Luana was the one that was really spoiled. She had anything she wanted. He had to survive on what he had. It wasn't until he went on his mission, on labor mission, that he got spoiled by his mother. Got him everything that he needed when he was on his mission. When he left and started working, he became very independent of her. And yeah, he was the one that used to help his mother.
Yeah.
I used to help everybody that I could, and if I didn't have it, I didn't have it. If I had it, I used to give it away. And or just to help the person. The unspoken rule was that I let him know. I had to let him know whenever especially money, and especially, yeah, just money actually, because if I knew somebody needed food or clothes or things like that, I would do it quite freely. And he used to be okay with that. But money, no. That was the law. You tell me before I give it away.
Yeah. So you're mentioning before, so what advice would you give your younger self on the day you got married, knowing what you know now?
Go back to school, learn education. Yeah. You have power when you're educated.
Yeah.
That's all I can say, especially married women.
Yeah.
And married girls, young married girls. It's sad when especially on the TV, when you know very well, they don't know what they're talking about sometimes. If they were educated in certain things or became educated and an expert at what they believe in, they would have a voice. But when they get up and talk a whole lot of rubbish, they have no voice. And it's because they have been educated. They haven't educated themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Stepping into motherhood, how did becoming a mother change how you saw yourself? It's interesting, this one, because I think, did much change because you were pretty much a mother before you became a mother?
Yeah.
Did it change with your own children? How you saw yourself?
I think I changed in that I had not only my children to think about, but I also had my husband to think about. And I had my mother to think about too. But I was able to put them in relative positions. Like my babies were first. No, my husband was first. I always put your father first. Made sure that he was to his meetings properly. He had dinner, he had breakfast, he was clean, all those things. He was always on top of my list. If he was fine, I could cope with the rest of the kids. My babies were fine. Nikki was fine. You kids know what you're supposed to be doing. My house is clean. And that's how I organize myself. If any of those things got out of sync, I would get lost. So I had to really instruct myself, you've got to do your washing now. You can't just leave it any longer. Because if you leave it any longer, you'll never get it done and you'll have twice as much tomorrow. To organize myself, my mother taught me, this is how you do this, and it leads into that. And you've got a clean house, your washing is done, your babies are clean, they're fed, they're having a sleep. Now you have a rest, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Each day. That was a daily routine. If I got out of, as I said, if I got out of sync, it was useless.
Were there any parts you had to put away to survive in order to raise us?
Not really, no, not really.
As long as you had your routine, you were okay.
Yeah. As long as I did my routine and had my routine, I knew that I was safe within myself. If I got out of sync, I knew there was tea wasn't cooking or my house was putty. That would really upset me. And your father used to get it when he used to get home from work. I can remember chucking a couple of things at him when he'd say to me, what you been doing all day? Many times that when he used to come home and nothing was done, it was because I was sick or because Nikki was sick or Shane was sick. Those were my most three things that really upset my married life with Nikki and Shane, because I used to worry about Shane being the baby and I couldn't give him that attention because of Nikki. And your father, when he comes home and say, hey, what have you been doing all day? Oh, boy. Oh, yeah. That was all.
Were there moments when you felt torn between protecting us and protecting yourself?
If he said no, it was no. Well, I tried to say no. It was sometimes, oh, maybe. And sometimes I would put my foot down and say, no, this is what's happening. And I would always make sure that I had the answer to why it was happening. That's how I protected myself, and that's how I protected you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could possibly have a very different childhood. But just let your father go full force to what he thought was right.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a little quick spiel on Nikki. How did they come to know it was viral meningitis in the end?
The lumbar puncture in his back. As soon as they got that, they knew that it was viral. But the thing about it, I always feel so grateful that we had the priesthood and that I had a testimony where when the doctors told me that we only had 48 hours with him because he was so bad. So I took myself off into a corner and I asked Heavenly Father if I could have him for a little bit longer. And because I had him for 39 years altogether. And just knowing that I was given that blessing, otherwise I don't know how I would have coped with his loss.
Yeah.
Because I blame myself, and I know it wasn't me, but I blame myself that I could have done better bringing him up. I could have recognized that there was something wrong with him that I should have taken him to the doctor earlier, but I just thought he had colic. So when I did take him in, and they did say to me for colic, so I left it, but it wasn't until the next day I realized there was something really wrong with him. It's when I took him straight to Waikato Hospital, and that's when he was diagnosed. And I wondered, is it because he was supposed to be like that? But why did he have to suffer to be like that? And maybe it was because it was to teach us, teach Dad and I, everything that we lose when we were bringing Nikki up. And when we did lose him, it wasn't hard because I had him for that time. And that's what I asked him about before.
Yeah, I guess it's something that a lot of mothers go through when they go through that experience of, oh, if only I had taken them to the hospital last night or the day before, would that have made any difference? Did the doctors ever tell you that if they had caught it the day earlier or when you first took him to the hospital that it would have made a difference, or no? It was already on.
But I know, just going through with Nikki and knowing what I know now, it could have been better, because when the disease reached the brain, there was no hope. If I had got him in before that period of time, he would have been something like Paul, maybe like Paul.
Yeah.
Because when Paul got sick, doctor, there was no what do you call it, medication for when Paul got sick. Dr. Park, he injected Paul straight away with antibiotics, a full dose of antibiotics, and that's how he is what he is today. Otherwise, he could have been with it. Every day that doctor came out to see him up, gave him an antibiotic injection until he was fully diagnosed.
Yeah, fascinating. That was actually Uncle Paul way back then. And yeah, Nikki was years later, and they still didn't really pick up on it or treat him the way that doctor treated Uncle Paul.
The day that I took him into the doctor, it was a young locum that was on that particular day. Our family doctor was on holiday. And I know that if our family doctor was there, he would have known. I know he would have known. But he wasn't. So maybe that's how Nikki was supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah. And it's cool too, because from my perspective is, I guess it's one of those things, because we don't know any other option. There was no other option. Nikki was who he was, and that's the end of the story. Nothing could have changed that. And yet our experience with him was so much, I guess, richer, because he taught you guys and he taught us as well. Just, I guess from my experience with him, I became more protective about him and more, well, looking back now, it's that unconditional love towards him and those with disabilities, those who have Down syndrome. There's nothing wrong with them. You don't see them with that, in that view of them having something wrong with them or being faulty or whatever it is. It's just like they're a different version and they're actually really cool. Whereas if Nikki had been normal, whatever normal is, who knows what that experience would have been. It was what it was, and we got to have him, like you said, for 39 years rather than not knowing him at all. We wouldn't have known him at all. Just the fact that we had a baby brother who died at 6 weeks because he got viral meningitis, but we got to have him and experience him in the way that we did, albeit some of it not very nice.
One time he fell down in the garage steps and broke his leg, and everybody was in the lounge playing a game, and he made himself crawl back and hopped into his bed with his broken leg.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that clearly, because we were all sitting there going, why is he in bed? It was pretty early into the night. I didn't even think he had dinner or anything. So we were like a little bit dumbfounded until you went in and started feeling his body, and he flinched when you grabbed his leg. Oh, here we go. And that was a painful time because he had to beep out and all the rest of it with his friggin' broken leg.
Imagine the pain he would have gone through, eh?
Yeah, exactly. There was no scream. There was no noise, no nothing.
No crying.
No crying at all. He was just there.
Yeah.
So anything like that, no, there's just no register of what was going on.
Sometimes when I think about it, for him to crawl from the garage to his bed and to put himself in his bed, I wonder if he was blessed with no pain, because I'm sure an ordinary person would have fainted with the pain.
Yeah, people faint at the pain of breaking their limbs.
Yeah. But he did that without any hesitation at all. It wasn't until I walked in and touched his leg and then I realized there was something wrong.
Yeah. The other thing too is I was thinking as well when he was younger, because I still remember these as well, when he used to bang his head against the wall because out of frustration, he was frustrated. So I used to sit there and go, does that not hurt his head? Is he not hurting his head? So it goes along with the same thing, like, man, maybe he doesn't know what pain is. Like, there is nothing like that. But then again, you know how they say to know pain, you have to know the opposite. So he wouldn't know that either. So then in my head, off I go going, so did he know what taste was?
Yeah.
It's those things where you're like, man, I wonder what his experience was of the world in his form. What was he, what do you say when,
There was a lot of things that he saw that we didn't see.
yeah. It was almost like a gift for him not to experience pain or different things that we experience in this world. But anyway, yeah, so that's interesting. He's always an interesting thing to reflect back on.
Great.
Quickly, because it's a bit of a long chat. Living with your cancer. So you've had cancer, you got diagnosed, you got the death sentence of 3 months that turned into a big fat lie. Then you had an open heart surgery, which took how long again to heal? You were in hospital for months.
9 months.
9 months to heal, which, yeah, was another experience. Goodness sake. What has your body taught you about strength and surrender and patience?
I learned a lot through the whole experiences. The first thing is, if I had time again, I would take care of my body better.
Yeah.
But then again, I thought, how could I, when I was on there's really no money to be able to spend on myself, because when I was working in Rotorua, I was helping my mother to survive.
Mm.
And when I got married, I was helping my husband to survive. So I really didn't have any extra money to spend on myself. When I spend on myself, eating healthily, just eating what we could afford, which was a lot of meat. The easiest thing we could possibly do when I started work, which was fish and chips and what we could afford. Fizzy drinks. There was no education at that time about fizzy drinks, fish and chips. It was just take care of yourself. How you do that. That's what I mean. We had no education in that sort of thing. If we did, it didn't make sense. But if I had my time again, I would make sure that you fellas ate healthily and took greater care of yourselves. And I would make sure that you would do that, because knowing what I'm going through now, it's not easy. I'm having repercussions now about the diabetes.
So, well, from all of that, what does the healing part that has happened over time from your mastectomy, from your heart surgery, from having cancer, what does the healing mean to you now compared to what it might have been meant 20 years ago?
As for my body, I don't think about it anymore. I just worry that I might get to the stage where I might have to have amputations on my feet or my leg. My healing has been the same. The only reason why I didn't heal while I was in the hospital was because I couldn't eat. I didn't want to eat any of their food. But as soon as I came out, I was fine. But the healing part of my body is I respond to treatment. If I was in a hole where I don't respond to treatment, that'll be it. But I do respond to treatment, and I do the best that I can to make sure that I eat properly, or
Yeah.
I try and take care of myself as much as I possibly can. But I don't worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed as far as that's concerned. Everybody keeps telling me how good I am. I'm thinking, hey, because I was feeling rotten at the time when they're telling me that I'm looking good.
Compared to most, then yeah, with what you have, yeah, you do look better, or you are coping with it better than what those who are sitting in hospital who are just being diagnosed. And you've been sitting there with it for how long? How many years now? Have you been willing yourself to die? So have there been any surprising gifts or awakenings that have come from your illness and your physical limitations? Is there anything where you are sitting there and the gift in all of this is whatever it may be.
I don't really think about it. I just take one day at a time.
Yeah.
I worry about what I eat and what I drink and whatever, but I don't worry about it.
But what I can remember too is it hasn't always been fish and chips and whatever fizzy drinks throughout our life. I can still always remember you being very conscientious of food. Maybe not as strict as most people, but you always had the recipe books to, maybe there was a two-part to this as well, the recipe books to cook different meals. You were brought up in how to cook and use different ingredients and different recipes and things like that. You've always sought out alternative methods of healing with Nikki, and going to talk to a Reiki healer, the Māori healers that you would look into for different things. So there's, I don't know, it's obviously maybe something that's an unconscious thing for you to look at those sorts of things and to research recipes and meals and things to help you along with whatever you're experiencing.
I do know that when I think about, especially about your fella's health and my moka's health, I'm still getting phone calls on, then what happens when, or man, what happens? What do you do with this particular stuff? The answers come quite clearly and quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I know it's because my interest has always been the healing of our bodies. And I just wish that I had been much older when Nanny Medical was alive. I would have loved to been through what she knew. Maybe I inherited something of her that I would look for an alternative rather than depend on the general medication. It's funny because sometimes when I'm thinking about what's going on with myself, something always comes up in my mind. Why don't you try this particular thing? Or I might be reading an article and I'm thinking, oh yeah, and put it away. When I need it, it comes into life.
Yeah.
So I guess I have been blessed in that way, where I've always had an interest in different medications and different ways of healing. I always get an answer as to what I should and what I shouldn't do. But then I thought to myself, what else can I do to help me? Maybe it's something that's being inbuilt that I've inherited from somebody, I don't know. But you're the same, aren't you?
Yeah. Noticing I in hindsight noticed that I'll always seek out the alternative rather than listen, or I purely use the doctor and specialist to understand what's going on. And then I'll be like, okay, I'll go away and find out an alternative to help me, or I'll find a specialist that deals with alternative, not all holistic medicine rather than the farmer. Yeah, I know I've always been like that as well. So then the last question, it might have been answered before, but if your story could help even one person find their voice or courage, what part of it would you want them to hear the most? So I know you touched on being educated and taking care of your body.
Yeah. Just making sure that you do the best you can in what you eat and your exercise, that sort of thing.
All right, then. Any last words before I close it off? I got a lot of editing to do with this one. One story I'll just cut in really quickly. I remember when WWII Warriors came out, and I don't know if you remember this, and somehow I got in to see it. I went in to see it this was when did it come out? 91? So I would have been like 11, 12. And I remember coming home and saying to you, I saw this really cool movie and it was called WWII Warriors. And you were doing something at the same time and you went, oh yeah. And I went, yeah, it was really good, Mum. You should go and see it. And you just stopped what you're doing, turned around to me and said, no, thank you. I don't want to see my life in replay. And in my head, that was the trigger of thinking, what is she talking about? Because at that time, we didn't have any understanding of Nanny being abused by koro. We just saw what we saw in front of us, koro and Nanny. Yeah, everything was hunky-dory. And I remember mulling over it for ages going, I don't understand what's happening. And it wasn't until later in life that things started coming out. And even more so when koro passed away. Right up until they put the lid on, even when they were putting the lid on, you were saying to Nanny that she needed to forgive him. And she didn't until the lid was on.
I'll tell you what, it was exactly like that.
So her whole life, she had carried that hurt, the pain, the anger of how she was treated by koro. Did she ever, though, get any closure from that?
Yeah, when my big brother told me that I needed to forgive my father and that it was because of the war that he came home with PTSD, and it was unknown at that time, so they had to cope with it the best that they could.
So it was Uncle Teddy that was the one that instigated you need to forgive. So you held on to that for how many years as well?
Oh, hell, 50 years. When he died, that's when Uncle Lee said to me, it took me a while to do that, to forgive him. In fact, it was only a couple of years ago that I did forgive him. And it was a good feeling. It was a good feeling. I don't know why I didn't do it before, because I don't think about it anymore.
Yeah. That's when you know that true forgiveness has happened. You forget about it. It's like it never happened, what did. But there's no charge behind it. But then throughout that time, what was your relationship like with koro growing up? Did you just ignore him, or did you just, ignore him?
I pretended he wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
That's how I coped with it.
Same with Uncle Teddy?
No, Uncle Teddy was different, because wherever koro was, it was usually where Teddy was too, because I don't know how it happened, but that's how it happened. I don't know, but I can remember Teddy being there all the time. He was the one that always got the punch in the face. And I used to think to myself, why, it's the same as Nikki, why are you there? Why do you stand there and do what you do to get a punch or to get a kick in the ass? I don't know why. But as I said, maybe because Teddy had no option, because could have made him be there to do what he wanted Teddy to do.
Yeah. And Uncle Lee, what was Uncle Lee's experience? Was it just the fact, like, had he learned of Nanny's beatings that she used to get? And what was his experience with koro?
He never had any experience with koro.
Oh, okay. He didn't know the full-blown experience.
Yeah, he just used to hear about it. And I can't remember telling him. And I don't think Teddy would have told him either what we went through with him. I think it might have been our mother telling me what we went through, because I think we just made it obvious that we hated our father.
Yeah.
We spoke to ask Mum why we were like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess that the reasoning too is why Nanny was so private as well, because if she was getting beat up and her face didn't look the greatest, or bumps and bruises, she wouldn't want anybody in her house. Kids coming over, because kids, no filters on the mouths, that go home and say things.
I can still see my mother walking around with two black eyes, and my father saying, what happened? Yeah. Quite blatant what happened.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's always something that stuck with me, coming home and telling you about Once We're Warriors, and you suddenly going, no, thank you. I don't want to see my life in replay, and thinking, what is she talking about? Like, weird. But also the unraveling of the story of Nanny and koro, and connecting the dots of everything, why it all happened. Because I didn't question one time why Nanny lived in the house and koro lived out in the garage. That was because it was just normal. And yet he still wore his wedding ring.
When they were staying together at their house, it didn't matter that koro was in the garage. it wasn't until Nan told me that she was still being abused verbally.
Oh,
When we took her, that's when we made her come and stay with us. Because we didn't know. It wasn't until Mum said to me that she was still being
really
abused.
abused.
And that was it. I said, "You coming to stay with us, Mum?" She said, "Oh, no, I'll be too much of a whore." Nah, back of thing.
Yeah. Gee, and what was it still being verbally abused, even sober, or when he was still drunk, getting drunk? Which was, to me, I still remember the parties that he would have drinks in the garage.
He'd drink himself stupid in the shed and come in and have a go at me.
Or
I,
like,
I think the time when Nanny came over to visit, and I just said to her, "Oh, you okay, Mum?" And she goes, "Oh," she said, "I'm just so tired of him." And I said, "Well, what's been going on?" And that's when she told me. We just dragged her over. But I really enjoyed having my mother with me. She was such a big help, especially when Micah was the baby. I still miss her.
and it's funny, I wish Nan was still around, and then I think, oh, hell, she'll be like 100 and something if she was still around. She was 80, 82, 83 when she passed away back in 2006. Anyway, all right, Dan, thank you. Thank you for, after all of that,